Hi, everyone. I'm Pam from the NSA, and I'd like to introduce today's Lunch and Learn session titled Rejecting Stuttering Stigma and Recovering from the Shame. And we have an exciting facilitator today. Hanan Hurwitz from Israel is going to share his thoughts on how to reject stigma and deal with shame. So, turning the floor over to Hanan. Hanan, we're really excited to have you here with us today. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pam. I'm really excited to be here. See everyone, lots of people I know of, such as Vince Vorter, but never had the pleasure to speak with. So, Vince, thank you very much for your book. Hello, everyone. So, my name is Hanan Hurwitz. I'm getting old, almost 62. And I'm an electronics engineer by training, and working for the last 6 years, more or less, as an independent consultant in quality management and regulatory management. I was very fortunate 15 years ago to in the depth of quite a big crisis with my speech, to find the NSA. And I wrote to Tammy. I didn't know Tammy at the time. Asked if I could attend the conference. She said sure, and that was an immense event for me. I started to learn about stuttering, to research about stuttering, and to hopefully pass on what I've learned, in the hope that maybe it will help someone else. So today we're going to talk, as Pam said, about stigma and shame, as they are associated with stuttering, and I'm going to offer some pathways to recovery, not recovery from stuttering, but recovery from the stigma and the shame and the trauma and all the effects of the stigma. As an introduction or overview, just want to mention some key points for me. Point number one, stuttering is not a problem. The problem, if there is indeed a problem, is stigma. It's from stigma that struggle to avoid our stuttering forms, and it's from stigma, probably this struggle as well, that shame, anxiety, and fear develop, and all those continue to drive the struggle to avoid our stuttering, which drives the shame, and we're in this big snowball which keeps on growing. So stigma and the struggle with stuttering are the problem. To each his own. Some people might have a struggle with stuttering and not feel they have a problem, and that's cool. So very important to note that there's no judgment here. Okay, in anything I say, there isn't any judgment about what a person experiences or doesn't experience, or how a person chooses to handle their experience. There isn't any judgment. The public stigma, we have public stigma and self-stigma, which I'll speak about. And I think that those are the true sources of suffering that can be associated with the experience of stuttering. So it's not my stuttering so much as my attitude towards my stuttering, which is driven by stigma. And it's not so much stuttering, but it's my self-limiting thoughts and behaviors. It's my negative self-talk that I'm not aware of and allowing to guide me. That is the problem. and it comes from the belief that stuttering is something bad, and that comes from stigma. It's not written in the Constitution, and it's not a universal law of physics. It's just an opinion, like most or all stigma is. There's toxic terminology, in my opinion, that fuels the public stigma of stuttering, such as the term recovery from stuttering, which is used so much in research, or overcoming stuttering. These are really unhelpful, in fact, toxic terms that just fuel the stigma. In my opinion, fluency-focused therapies also perpetuate the stigma, because they perpetuate the belief that stuttering is something that we shouldn't be doing. To get into things a bit, I'm going to recap some basic information, just so that we have a common basis for our discussion. So we're speaking about developmental stuttering as opposed to acquired stuttering. And in developmental stuttering, there are primary characteristics of stuttering. There are secondary characteristics of stuttering. The primary characteristics are the repetitions, or the prolongations, or the blocks. And the primary characteristics of stuttering, research shows, there's a lot of research, a ton of research that shows that there's a neurobiological basis to stuttering. In developmental stuttering, we stutter because there's a difference in our brain. It's not a defect, it's not a disorder. There's a difference that affects speech, motor, timing, and initiation. The secondary characteristics of stuttering, or the secondary behaviors, are things that we do as we try to not stutter. So for example, if I'm saying the word stuttering and I stutter on the word stuttering, and I'm desperate to not stutter, then my stuttering might become stuttering as I gather my entire being, my physical, there's a physical effort, there's a mental effort, as I do whatever I can, whatever I believe is helpful in order to get the word out. So there is physical tension, there are involuntary body movements. I would avert my gaze all the time. It's part of a trauma response of dissociation. In that moment of threat, people use filler words like as if, any behaviors that are avoiding getting to the actual stutter. And again, no judgment. It's clear, it's understandable. I would assume I think to everyone why we do that. Question: does anybody here have a question about why we have those secondary behaviors? Why are we trying to avoid the stuttering? All right, so I'll carry on, and again, feel free to ask questions anytime you want. Interrupt me. It's all good, right? So the secondary characteristics include a multitude of avoidance behaviors that are behaviors that we have as part of avoiding stuttering. And this avoidance of stuttering is what we can often refer to some others maybe as the struggle with stuttering. So it's the struggle to avoid stuttering, with the secondary behaviors, with the struggle, we create what is often called severe stuttering. So there might be people with whose neurophysiology is such that they will stutter anyway on every syllable or every word, and it's incredibly hard to get a word out. I understand. Many cases I've seen, and I know this in my experience, when we're able to differentiate between stuttering and the struggle, we can learn, if we want to, okay, how to identify what these secondary behaviors are, um, how to be aware of them, how to stop them if we want to. Again, there's no judgment here, okay? But in my experience, for me, if we were to go back 15 years and more, I would suffer greatly from uncontrolled jaw tremors or dropping my gaze, creation of a lot of physical tension as I try to speak, or rather as I try to avoid stuttering, and I suffered. So for me, understanding the difference between struggle and stuttering, um, helped me and still helps me to avoid a lot of the suffering that I experienced from stuttering. Of course, in parallel, the absolute unconditional rejection of stigma and of someone's opinion that it's not okay to stutter, that stuttering is a disorder, and unconditional acceptance of myself as a person who stutters, who knows that my stuttering is variable, it will change over time. I have days when I stutter more and days when I stutter less, and it's all good. No judgment. It's not good, it's not bad. It just is. Can be very hard, but it just is. Pam.
I wanted to draw your attention to a comment that Jamie wrote in the chat.
Hi,
I don't know.
Jamie.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see it or not.
Um,
She talks
where?
about she she talks about a secondary behavior.
Mhm. Okay, so you're saying if I've got the right comment, Jamie, you wrote, I developed a secondary behavior. It happened automatically, and if I focus, I can stutter freely without these secondary. But if I don't think about the secondary, but if I don't think about it, the secondary happens. And you ask me, is the body trying to protect itself and avoid? So I can't give it's a wonderful question. Thank you, Jamie. I can't give a categorical answer for you. I can suggest that yes, we're trying to protect ourselves. We go back to stigma. We know it's not okay to stutter. In the moment of stuttering, we feel threat. So we try to, or automatic, we try to protect ourselves. And the secondary behaviors, whether for me with my with dropping my gaze, dissociating from the present moment, or anybody else with what they're doing, we're trying our damnedest to protect ourselves from this threat. And it's a physiological response, and it's a trauma response, and trauma is an important topic to speak about within the experience of stuttering. Yes, Vince.
Uh, I think it's important to point out that there are people who don't stutter who also have secondary uh, speech characteristics I've talked with some people and they avoid eye contact.
Mhm.
There, a lot of people, in fact, most people use filler words or
Right.
filler sounds.
Mhm.
So uh, I think it's important to point out that it also could be a problem, or it could be a characteristic of people who don't stutter also, and so that separates it further from stuttering, I think.
Thank you very much, Vince. Um, you know, these behaviors, some of them, as you say, are not unique to people who stutter. I'm just speaking from the perspective of people who stutter.
Right.
So it just because I might avoid eye contact or add filler words, it doesn't mean that people who stutter don't do that, if you know what I mean, right? I just want to say something about eye contact. Often we're encouraged to keep eye contact, um, but we must each of us, I suggest, should examine ourselves with a lot of self-compassion and decide what's good for us. I was speaking to a therapist a couple of weeks ago who had a youth in therapy, and she was really, you know, forcing him to make eye contact. But making eye contact was too much for him. All right, he was overwhelmed. He was in this fight flight, in this traumatic situation, and breaking eye contact is a defensive mechanism for him. So it's something to think about. Sorry, Vince, hold on a second. Doug, you wanted to say something?
Oh, well, I was just going to add to what Vince had said, but you did that, and that oftentimes, though, um, those of us who stutter, our secondary characteristics oftentimes is due to stuttering itself. So it's not like a quote unquote normal speaker who may have, various things, eyes down or some R or some ers and all of that. So really, really, I just wanted to make clear that, most of us who stutter, our secondary characteristics are primarily due to our stuttering.
Right.
And I
Okay.
Can
think
I?
it's a way of trying to get the words out. It is something, just like you said, uh, physiological, and it's something that happens oftentimes just when we are stuttering. And then the other part that you said is what I'm extremely big on, and that's what I convey to a lot of people, is that, those of us who stutter, to really engage in really comprehensive self-analysis of what is going on.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
thank you, Doug.
Funny story I would like to tell. Several years ago, I started working on uh, total eye contact. And I was talking with somebody, and uh, she stopped me in mid-sentence and said, "Why are you looking at me so funny?" So it should be natural. It shouldn't be a forced stare. And I completely agree with Douglas. Is that right? Yeah. It's um, we who stutter. We have the secondary characteristics, and it's because of who we are. So I totally agree with that, Doug.
So I'd just like to venture both to Doug and to Vince that the secondary characteristics are not because of the stuttering or because of who we are, but because of the stigma. if we really want to go back to see why, it's not because of the stuttering, it's because we're trying not to stutter. And why we're trying not to stutter? Because the stigma, because the shame, and all of that. So just something, that's my opinion, my thoughts. I just put it out there. To respond to Steve Ernst's comment about keeping eye contact. Yeah, very challenging, so important. It was for me, Steve, for sure. In the therapy setting, needs to be done with care, because depends where the person is in their journey and where they are with handling the trauma. We don't want to create additional trauma in the therapy room. So obviously a very complex topic. Let's carry on speaking a little bit more about stigma. So Joanna, when you're watching for secondary characteristics, it's really interesting, right? But the secondary characteristics, as people have said, their reaction to the stuttering, to the stigma, they're a defense mechanism. So we really have to approach it with compassion and care. And we don't want the child to feel bad, or anyone to feel bad about the stuttering, and to feel bad about the secondary characteristics, and to feel bad about not making eye contact. Right?
Yeah, that's so true. And it seemed like he started to develop a stutter about 1 to 2 months ago. And of course, you know, I'm very sensitive to that. So I'm watching him and, you know, paying close attention to him. And we've just noticed that just in the past week, we think that he has trouble saying his eyes. So instead of saying like, I'm tired, he says, me tired. So he's already starting to do different things to substitute the sounds that he has trouble saying. And we're actually going to be working with a speech therapist soon. And for me, it's not so much to get him not to stutter, like that's not the point. It's more so that, like we're talking about shame and stigma, that he doesn't feel that shame and stigma and lose his confidence. So I want to make sure that even if he stutters, that he still has his confidence to speak and doesn't stop speaking because of that shame and stigma.
Wonderful. So key to that confidence is resilience, self-advocacy, which hopefully I'll have time to talk about as well. All right. Thanks everyone for your comments so far. So there's public stigma, which can be thought of as a manifestation of societal negative reactions to those who are perceived as different from a so-called norm, and by those who for some reason think that they have the right to define what is normal and what is acceptable in terms of human diversity. And you know, stigma is so pervasive in so many fields. Stuttering, of course, is one of those human characteristics that are stigmatized. And as we all know, we must cope with the negative judgments of others every day, as we sometimes struggle to make ourselves understood. Self stigma can be developed, can develop from the public stigma. I've met one person who stutters, who told me that his self stigma developed before he had any idea of the public stigma. So that's very interesting. So when faced with public stigma, we might believe the messaging that we're absorbing, that we are somehow inferior to others due to our difference. And so we accept the public stigma, we internalize the message, and we have self-stigma. We go from society saying that our difference is not acceptable, to us saying to ourselves that our difference is not acceptable, and even saying to ourselves I say to myself, I am not acceptable. I have this defect, and it's no good. I am not acceptable. There's the message that self-stigma develops, I think, quite quickly and becomes very powerful. And the self-stigma, with the shame and the fear, but the self-stigma drives those self-limiting thoughts and beliefs and behaviors. I am not good enough. Yeah, I know you all know I'm not good enough. I'm just saying it, to demonstrate the point. Moving on to shame. It's all related, of course, but what is shame? So shame can be thought of as an intense belief of being defective in some way that we believe is unacceptable to society, perhaps to ourselves. And key in shame is that we believe that this defect is either irreparable by its nature or due to the obstacles to repairing it that we believe we cannot overcome. So just as an example, fluency focused therapies that work that a small amount of people might have joy from. Although I've never met a person who stutters who has had joy from fluency focused therapy, and I obviously haven't met everyone. My experience, and I'm not alone, went to an intensive fluency shaping course. I failed my intensive fluency shaping course because after 2 weeks, after trying to speak like this, I again stuttered. So I believed that I was irreparable. I was defective, irreparable. I had been to the course. I had paid a lot of money, and I'm still defective. So that kind of thing can create the shame. It can certainly reinforce the shame. There's a real difference between shame and guilt, right? Guilt, I've done something wrong. It arises from my actions. I understand I've done something wrong, but I can fix it. I can change the way I behave in the future. But shame is the feeling of I am wrong. And the real challenge with shame is that we're ashamed to talk about the things we feel ashamed about. And shame thrives in darkness. Shame thrives when we don't talk about it. Complete opposite. Shame dissipates when, I think in the words of Brene Brown, I'm not sure, shame dissipates when we shine a light on it. What does it mean, shine a light? When we talk about it. Then we can start to, to come out from under this heavy weight. It takes time, it takes community, it takes trust in ourselves and other people. We develop shame from the public stigma, from the self-stigma. We develop shame because we believe that we are unable to use the fluency tools that we learned. We develop shame when we have what seems to us to be uncontrollable physical tension and bodily movements. We know that this results from the struggle, but until we know that, we just feel, hey, this is all happening to us. I've got no control over it, and we can feel shame. If I'm speaking and all the time, not all the time, I'm stuck with a lot of tension and my jaw is open and my head's back and there's all this tension. Again, there's no judgment, right? I've had those behaviors, and to me they've been uncontrollable, and I feel shame. So there are many aspects, there are many causes for our shame, but as long as we're not talking about it, they're going to feed each other, and the shame is going to grow. For me also, I had social difficulties, and one of the aspects of shame that I struggle with today deeply. I don't know if I've said this to anyone in the past. I feel ashamed that I wasn't able to advocate for my children when they were young. So when children were young, before I found the NSA, I was tied up in this shame of stuttering. I had great difficulty speaking, huge struggle on every syllable. And going to a parents teachers meeting was, no, I'm not going to do this, right? And I didn't advocate for my children in many ways. And I can see what I perceive to be the effects of that lack of advocacy on my behalf for my children. And for me, that's something really hard to be with. But in the context of non-judgment and compassion and self-compassion, and firstly just being aware of what's happening, at least I can be with it instead of hiding it away, pushing it down, trying to close it up in a dark box, and that's helpful. So shame, of course, causes self-limiting or self-destructive behaviors, and causes us, by the self-limiting and self-destructive behaviors, cause us to not live the life that we want for ourselves. So consider this. I stutter. I don't understand about stuttering. I stutter. I have, I get blocked. I have endless blocks. I have jaw tremors. I've got this and this characteristics, whatever. I stutter. I feel a lot of shame. I have, I believe that I'm defective. I believe that I can only, for example, do a job that doesn't require talking, or I believe that I'm not good enough. I believe no one's going to love me. No one's going to accept me. I don't love myself. It's not because of the stuttering, because of the shame and the self-limiting beliefs that are a result of the self-stigma and the stigma. It's a result of this story, which has no factual basis, that stuttering is a defect, where it isn't. It just is. It doesn't mean stuttering is easy, right? We're avoiding judgment. It's not, stuttering isn't good and fluency isn't bad, or vice versa. It just is. Sometimes it can be hard. Trauma. How are we doing for time? We're okay in the meantime. I haven't yet run over my time, right? All right. Trauma, there's more and more research being done about trauma as it relates to stuttering. Is Heather here perhaps? Heather Najman might be here with us if she is. Hello, Heather. Heather's studied and also taught a lot about this, and has helped me a lot. Trauma doesn't only respond from a single unique event, such as, for example, a soldier in battle, or I hate to speak about it, but any kind of personal attacks on people, or that people experience. Trauma occurs when we're under threat and we're unable to run away and defend ourselves. So if I'm a soldier and I'm in a battle, can't run away and defend myself. If I'm in an abusive relationship, probably I can't run away and defend myself. I'm trapped. When I stutter and I'm subject to the stigma, the self-stigma, and the shame, and all the rest, I'm in the situation of speaking. I feel intense discomfort and shame and all of that, and I'm trapped. So we have a lot of trauma in stuttering. Stuttering is not only from traumas not only from one major event, traumas from, it can be from an accumulation of events. Every time we think about speaking, every time we speak, every time I think, hey, I'd love to, let's say, I'm going to use you, Vince. I'd love to talk to Vince Water. But no, I'm not going to call him out because I'm a person who stutters. He's not going to want to talk to me, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so every time I even think about doing something, I'm held back by my beliefs about stuttering and about myself and about this overarching story of not good enough. And the trauma develops, the trauma accumulates. I think it's Gina Ross maybe who wrote that, yeah, Gina Ross, traumatic events can also be ordinary occurrences which have an accumulative effect on our bodies and minds, and trauma manifests as a lasting emotional response to incidents that overwhelm our capacity to cope and respond. So trauma manifests as a lasting emotional response to incidents that overwhelm our capacity to cope and respond. And I don't know about you folks. For me, it's a very accurate description of one of the effects of, not of stuttering, but of my belief that stuttering is bad. As I said, thankfully there are people like Heather, like other people. There's a researcher in Israel who's about to publish, hopefully, a paper, a research about trauma and stuttering. Wonderful that we have these folks who are talking about trauma and stuttering and researching it, and I think it's very, very important. I'd like to show you one image, so I'm just going to share my screen. You'll tell me if you can see this image or not. Let me see if I can make it bigger. It's just something that I thought about. We have primary stuttering, we have public stigma, and there might be trauma associated with that. We've got struggle with our stuttering as we struggle to avoid stuttering, and there might be trauma associated with it. We've got self-stigma, which develops, and again, trauma. We've got shame, and of course, lots of trauma associated with shame. There's more struggle, there's self-limiting beliefs, and trauma's greedy. Trauma feeds off all of these things and feeds back into them. The good news, of course, is that when we understand this, then we can figure out, each to his own, where to step in and break the cycle. If we want to break the cycle, each to his own, to determine, where am I suffering? Okay, so I might be stuttering and blocking on every syllable, and I'm cool. I don't have any problem. Someone interrupts me, I say wait. So there's not an objective definition, perhaps, of, or no, not perhaps, of suffering, or what a person should or shouldn't do. To each his own, depending on, I think, where that person feels that they are suffering, or where they have limitations, where they're not able to live the lives that they want to live for themselves. Okay, and always like to exempt from this discussion the serial killers amongst us. Those folks really, I feel I can say, really should take a good look at themselves and change. But apart from that, so let's maybe see what are some of the approaches that we can use in healing and thriving with our stuttering, right? So There are many things, and I'm going to mention them, but I don't have any particular priority as in terms of what's more important. Words have power. I mean, we have authors like Vince who write books that engage us, write stories that engage us. They're powerful. They bring us knowledge. They bring us new worlds. They bring us new experiences. It's amazing. But words have power in terms of limiting us and our lives. One of the most toxic and stigma promoting terms in the world of stuttering for me is recovery. We often read in research about recovery from stuttering, or the people say for children who stutter before the age of 6, there's possibility of spontaneous recovery. Or here's something we can do to help the kid recover from stuttering. But recovery implies illness. And how does the mother or the father of 6-year-old Johnny, whose stuttering hasn't stopped, how does she feel? She's told, well, your son didn't recover from stuttering, so he's most likely going to stutter all his life. Think about the words. Obviously, the intention is different, but the words, right? And we interpret words. We're human beings. We read, we write, we hear, we interpret words. Recovery has an association with illness. So what, is little Johnny going to be ill for all his life? And that's what the parents believe. It's often seen as a tragedy. Johnny didn't recover from stuttering, so now his whole life is going to be messed up because he stutters. And everybody suffers just because of that belief driven by that word. Stuttering might pass or it might not pass preschool age. Okay, but the word recovery, it's pretty toxic. We can recover from our self-limiting thoughts and beliefs about stuttering and about ourselves. We can recover from the stigma. We can recover from struggle behavior that exacerbates our stuttering and increases our suffering as and if we want. We can recover from all those perceptions and beliefs and then live the lives that we want for ourselves. Similar to recovery is this term overcoming stuttering. We don't have to overcome stuttering. In fact, we probably can't because it's in our physiology. We can overcome our negative thinking, or our not negative, our incorrect thinking and incorrect beliefs about stuttering. And by overcoming our incorrect thoughts and beliefs about stuttering, we can thrive. And we can really live the lives that we want while stuttering, yeah. Would just like to give a shout out in this context to the book Stammering Pride and Prejudice, which came out in, I don't know, 2017. I guess it doesn't matter. It's a series of articles edited by Chris Constantino, Patrick, oh God, my memory. Patrick, someone other from England, I'll remember as soon as we end this call. Campbell, thank you. And Sam Simpson, a speech therapist from England. And the book is called, Stammering Pride and Prejudice, Difference, Not Defect. And it makes all the difference when we look at it as a difference, not a defect. The power of words. I'd like to step one moment into the world of Stoic philosophy, of which I have a great interest. It's often said in the world of Stoic philosophy that the first principle, as laid down by a dude in ancient Greece, ancient Rome, called Epictetus, how it's pronounced. And he says, some things are in our control and others are not. And the key to living is to identify what's in my control and what is not in my control, and to stop fighting against what is not in my control. And as it applies to stuttering, I don't have control as to whether I stutter or not. I have control as to how I think about stuttering and to my perception about stuttering, and to, because of that, maybe how I stutter. For example, without struggle, I don't struggle so much as I used to. And again, this is not a judgment about struggle. This is just, my personal experience, and everybody for themselves. But the struggle was where I suffered. So I don't have control about stuttering. And if I can see that, and I can understand that, yes, stuttering has a neurophysiological basis, and I can understand that there's this thing called stigma, by which the public, whoever that is, attempts to tell us what's right and wrong, I can say, okay, the opinion of XYZ that stuttering is bad is an opinion. It's out of my control. It's not my business. I stutter. It's not in my control. I have control over how I perceive it. And here I have a lot of ability to change my life and to thrive, because I can change the way I think about stuttering. And that's the byline, of course, of Stutter Talk, changing the way we think about stuttering one podcast at a time. Incredibly valuable series of podcasts, if anybody wants to check it, to check it out. So understanding that stuttering is what it is, we can invest our energy into things that we can control: our thoughts, our beliefs, our relationships with other people, what our values are, instead of putting all our energy into trying not to stutter. I made a choice. I don't want to put all my efforts into trying to speak like this. I want to. It's a lot of effort. Of course, as I got older and I've got less and less energy, I have to be more selective about where I'm going to put my energy and my effort, to my values, to living the life I want to live. We can identify a lot of elements of the antidote to shame. Okay, not every person who stutters feels shame. A lot of us do or did. Shame is an overwhelming emotion, but there's a lot we can do about shame. There's a lot of antidotes to shame. So we said shame thrives on secrecy and silence, and its power is decreased when we accept and are open about who we are, when we choose to stop hiding. By the way, many speech therapists still, when treating a young child, a child who stutters, they don't use the word stuttering. So, okay, he's got dysfluency, or they tell a parent, don't use the word stuttering, because they're afraid of it, because stuttering has this huge stigma. But the kids know. They know something's happening with them, and they don't know what it is and don't know what it's called, and we don't speak with the kids about stuttering. And then we really mess them up. and we really create this shame. Because the kid reckons, hey, if they're not talking to me about it, it must be really, really bad. So the actions that we can take to resolve our feelings of shame about stuttering include, but are not limited to, unconditional self-acceptance about who we are and acceptance of our innate unconditional worthiness. It involves disassociating our sense of our worthiness from the opinions of others, and especially from the stigma that we experience. I think that I think it's Anita Blom, Annie, you'd know, she has the saying, sure, stutter, what are you good at? Right? Isn't that a wonderful counter to the hiding and the shame? I'll be with you in a second, Mary, okay?
Sure.
Another attitude which helps us with shame is self-compassion. It's not about pity. This is hard. Our stuttering, the situations, what we feel, what we experience is all hard. But when we look at it with self-compassion, as we would do to a good friend, right? Can we treat ourselves as we would treat a good friend? It helps. Hey, I'm having this hard time. It's not about pity, it's about recognition. Community helps. If I hadn't attended the NSA conference in 2010, I wouldn't have met you folks. I wouldn't have met Mary Wood. I wouldn't have had that wider view, that community, that meeting another 600 people who stutter. Vulnerability helps when we're open about our stuttering, say this is who I am. It includes self-disclosure, and when we're vulnerable, we unapologetically show our authentic selves. So we unapologetically show our authentic selves. Then shame loses its hold on us. Connected to that, of course, is the self-disclosure of stuttering. I worked with a number of children who stutter, volunteered in our association when I was part of the association. And the kids who we were able to convince to get up in front of the class and do a presentation on stuttering and say, okay, I stutter, this is what stuttering is about. Their lives changed 180 degrees. And mindfulness, non-judgmental awareness in every moment. These things help to dissipate the shame. Mary, I'm sorry I kept you waiting.
No, that's okay. I'm just loving this. And I was wondering if you've ever practiced voluntary stuttering. I was at an NSA conference many moons ago, and I sat with Vivian Sheehan for quite a while, and I walked away thinking voluntary stuttering was going to work for me, and it still does.
Mm-hmm. So personally, I haven't. It wasn't something that I felt comfortable with for many reasons. Okay, and the old shame and fear was in there as well. But yeah, when we can voluntarily stutter, I'll say like this: when I stutter, when I do not avoid stuttering, when I stutter openly, I feel today a great relief. This is me. Great. And that shame and that fear are not being built up. When I, in inverted commas, successfully avoid stuttering, right? Because it still happens when I'm in a situation or suddenly the old shame and fear comes up and I have an automatic reaction to not stutter, and I'll change a word or I'll add a filler word. Okay, it happens. Every time that happens, it feeds that shame and fear. I can feel that anxiety grow, but when I stutter, I feel authentic. It was one of the Buddhist philosophers who wrote about the two wolves within us, and I'm probably misquoting completely. I think it's Pema Chodron, Mary. Probably misquoting completely, but think about the two wolves in us, the good wolf and the bad wolf, and all of us have say a dark side and a light side inside of us. And the question then is, which one will grow? And the answer is whichever one we feed. So this shame busting is not something passive, it's active. And the self-acceptance is not passive, it's active. We're taking active steps, cognitive steps, writing, journaling, whatever it is, to feed our innate worthiness, and not let ourselves be thinking that we're inferior because we stutter. And the story I love to tell is about Mary Wood in 2010. She gave me her article called "I Love Myself, Especially When I Stutter." And I thought this was total madness. I kept it with me for years because I'd spoken with Mary and I thought, no, there has to be something in this. She can't be this crazy, right? But it took me a long time. But yeah, I love myself, especially when I stutter. Listen to those words that Mary wrote. I love myself, especially when I stutter. That changes everything. To the extent that one can, me in this case, find the way to live my life without letting my stutter impede me. In the world of, are we for time? We've got about another half an hour. So in the world of Buddhist philosophy, there are a number of aspects that I find very helpful. So we're not talking about Buddhism as a religion. We're talking about Buddhism as a philosophy, and a philosophy is a way of life. It's a wisdom of life. It's a way of being. And as with all philosophies, we read and we learn and we take what works for us and we discard either permanently or for now what doesn't work for us, and very important to avoid judgment. So I think that what is the key teaching in Buddhist philosophy and Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths, or more fully, the four Noble Truths of suffering. There's a common misconception about Buddhism that Buddhism teaches that everything is suffering. No, Buddhism doesn't teach that everything is suffering. Buddhism teaches us, in fact, to experience joy, because there's a lot of joy to be experienced when we open ourselves up to it. But there is hardship and then there is suffering in life. So the key to life is to not run away from our suffering, but to understand where we suffer and to work with it to resolve our suffering as much as possible. It doesn't mean that there's no pain, doesn't mean that there's no hardship. A couple of weeks ago, I heard a lecture by, I don't remember the guy's name, unfortunately, a Buddhist monk in Thailand, and he said the following: suffering, he said, there's an equation, suffering equals pain multiplied by resistance. So if I look at my stuttering or my experience as pain, I resist the stuttering. I want the stuttering to go away. I'll do anything. I'll avoid. I won't speak to people. I'll walk a mile to the shop instead of calling, which is what I used to do often, more than a mile maybe. Fighting against what is. I'm resisting what is. There's this thing, I'm investing a lot of effort in my resisting of it, and I'm creating a lot of suffering. So suffering is not a given. Not all people who stutter suffer, and not all suffering is the same. Everybody's experience is their own experience and unique. With respect, so the Four Noble Truths, they offer a way out of suffering, not by denying or repressing our suffering, but making an effort to understand our suffering and even embrace it as part of the way out. Not even to embrace the suffering as part of the way out. The first noble truth would be being aware and accepting that we are suffering. Again, no judgment. And I can say to myself, I'm suffering. I feel that I cannot talk. I'd love to talk to people, but I'm afraid. When I do talk, I have these blocks that are endless, and I avert my gaze. I dissociate. I sweat profusely, and I'm pretty sure no one likes me. I'm suffering. So we're trying to hold, as it were, that suffering without judgment and without. It's not about self-pity either. It's saying, as we would hold a friend, we hold ourselves and say, I'm suffering. Not good, not bad, no judgment, just a recognition of the situation as it is. The second noble truth is then to understand how our suffering arises. The first one, we say, okay, I'm suffering. This is my suffering. No judgment, no interpretation. This is my suffering. Now I'm going to think, how did the suffering come to be? I might say that I suffer because I stutter. But I've heard Hanan talk, right? So I know that I don't suffer because I stutter. I suffer because of my attitude towards and beliefs about my stuttering. And everything I say and everything I've learned from you folks. So nothing original here. Okay. I might say that I suffer because of ridicule and rejection. Okay, I tried to speak to a person, she or he mocked me, walked away, whatever. So I say I suffer because of ridicule and rejection. But actually, no, I suffer because I believe the story that's going on in my head. I believe that I'm being rejected because of my stuttering. Because there's another way of looking at it. Hey, that person was, I don't know, rude, aggressive, whatever. They're mocking me and I just have a stutter. That person has a problem. I don't have to be aggressive towards them, but I can turn it around. I can look at it in a different way. Our suffering as people who stutter, if we're suffering, arises, I believe, not only, but to a large extent because of the stigma. And just imagine if stuttering was not a stigmatized human characteristic. Just imagine. Our suffering also arises when we believe that we need the approval of others, of other people, for the way we talk, for who we are. I might be in speech therapy and I'm stuttering, and the therapist says, it's okay to stutter, but use your tools. Or I might be a child and I'm stuttering and my parent is angry with me, or my parent says, you can't have supper until you don't stutter. Of course, as a child, you're completely dependent on your parents. And of course, there's worse abuses that some people suffer as children. The third noble truth is how do we stop the creation of our suffering? So once we've recognized the fact of our suffering and understood how the suffering arises, we can turn our attention to the cessation, the stopping of the creation of our suffering. And some actions, I think, that can help us to cease the creation of the suffering, or understanding, because we have scientific proof that stuttering has a biological basis. It's not our fault. It's knowing without a doubt that stuttering is a difference and not a defect. And it's really important not just to read this and know it, but even write it down and repeat it as many times as it takes, because cognitive change takes time. Being able to differentiate between stuttering and the struggles with stuttering also helps me to cease the creation of the suffering. So I'm understanding more what's happening. Knowing that if you stutter, if you're a parent of a child who stutters, you aren't alone. We suffer greatly when we're in isolation with our suffering. Knowing that unapologetic self-disclosure of stuttering is liberating, is another aspect of the cessation of the creation of suffering. And being willing to reject the stigma, to let go of beliefs that we hold on to tightly, and as it applies to each of us individually, to take responsibility for making a change in our lives. Because there are things we can do. If we're suffering, there are things we can do to make a change that don't involve not stuttering. A lot of it is based on our thoughts and our beliefs and our self-limiting behaviors, etc. The fourth noble truth, I said there were four, right? It's called the eightfold path that leads us out of suffering, and the eight cognitive aspects that Buddhism teaches. And by the way, my source of learning, the one that I was able to understand and that worked for me, is The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh. And there are these eight concepts, starting perhaps with right view. View refers to perception. And the right view is that it's okay to stutter. Stuttering is a difference, not a defect. And we start with that, for me anyway. And there's right thinking, which involves awareness of thoughts and responding to thoughts in a way that's aligned with our values. We can't, stop our thoughts. We'll have the thought that, oh, I'm going to stutter again, and oh shit, and oh, this is going to be bad. But we can be aware of our thoughts. We don't have to fuse with them. Brings us into right mindfulness in a way. Right speech is saying what we want and not what we think we can say. Right livelihood, of course, is choosing a career and choosing work that is meaningful for us, instead of choosing work where we believe that we'll be able to speak and not stutter. So many people suffer because they choose work that they believe they can do because of whatever limitation they believe they have, as opposed to work they want to do. There's a lot of suffering involved in that. Another aspect that's very important in my mind, or very helpful, is mindfulness. And perhaps mindfulness can be at the basis of all of this. So simply put, in the words of John Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness is moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness. So think of it like this in the moment of stuttering, right? Our reaction in the moment of stuttering might be, oh my God, I'm stuttering. I'm in this trauma response. I'm in fight or flight response. I just want the moment to be over. But can we, in the moment of stuttering, be non-judgmental, be compassionate, and be curious? Because if we can, then that trauma response, that fight or flight response, will lose its energy, because we're not trying to run away. We're saying, this is the moment of stuttering. And again, in Mary's words, I love myself. I love myself in this moment of stuttering. It's okay. I'm not saying it's okay in terms of pity, but it's really okay. It's hard, but it's really okay. The reason this is so important to me is that it's the opposite of the automatic and completely understandable fear response that we're conditioned to do because of the stigma, because we fear the rejection and the ridicule. But we can be in that moment of stuttering. And if there are any responses or ridicule, we can also be non-judgmental about that. Someone mocks me, I suffer when I accept their mockery as being true for me in some way. And then I react with defensiveness, right? Or anger because I want to prove them wrong. But in fact, it's words. So words are powerful. But with mindfulness, we can just see those words pass us by. I spoke many years ago to prisoners, people who basically serving life sentences and living in a cage because of the things they did. And we were speaking about words and responses. And the one guy said, you know, that guy insulted me. Of course, I'm going to go and kill him. So we had a conversation about that, right? Yeah, we can take offense, but it's actually a choice. It's hard, but it's actually a choice. But the good news is that we can train ourselves and change the way we think and react to these words. So non-judgmental awareness, mindfulness, has the potential to support us in our journey of self-acceptance. And the present moment is all anybody ever has. This moment and this moment, it's all we ever have. So if we're in a stuttering block and it feels like the world is ending, the only time we have to effect a change, even if it's in the change we think, is in that moment. So mindfulness supports us in that. There's a difference, of course, between mindfulness and meditation. Meditation is what we do to practice being mindful and a whole bunch more. But mindfulness is not meditation. Mindfulness is a way of being, a way of living. John Kabat-Zinn mentioned 7 attitudes of mindfulness, starting with non-judgment. A key aspect of mindfulness is letting go. And when I joined the NSA in 2010, I became aware of a newsletter, a magazine that the good folks put out every quarter, I think it was, Annie. There was like a spring version, a summer version, a winter version, fall version, something like that. And letting go. And we can actually, if we put our minds to it, let go of our self-judgment, let go of the need for approval of others, but we need to do so with a lot of self-compassion. And Tara Brach, a key teacher in mindfulness Buddhism, speaks about radical acceptance in her perception being supported by the two wings, the mindfulness and the compassion. Pam.
Yeah, we have about 12 minutes left. So I wondered if you wanted to just open it up to any questions that folks might have in the last 10 minutes.
Thank you, Pam. I'm going to take another minute to speak
Okay.
about resilience. I'll try to do that quickly. And
Okay.
I'll be happy to send this presentation, Pam, and you can send it out to everyone, to everyone, so it's all cool. So resilience. Resilience is what helps us deal with and bounce back from adversity. And stigma, ridicule, all of that is part of adversity. And I propose that we don't deal with the stigma of stuttering and the ridicule and the non-acceptance, but by doing everything we can to not stutter. I propose that we deal with it by being resilient to all of that other people are doing. It's other people doing it. Resilience is not necessarily something that we're born with, but we can develop it. So we can create resilience, we can nurture resilience, and we create resilience actively by deciding to deal constructively with the challenges in our lives. And there's so much to say about resilience, but I just want to share, if you can still see my screen, some attitudes and actions, because, okay, let's be resilient. No, you can't just be resilient. These are things that one can actively do. It's like acceptance, it's not passive. Resilience, creating resilience, rejecting stigma, self-advocacy, these are not passive actions. We do things to create them. And it takes time, and we need self-compassion, remember? So these are some attitudes and actions that I think we can do to create resilience. Why do we create resilience? To help us live the lives that we want for ourselves. So, community. Being aware of the words we use, because words have power. I didn't have a bad day with my speech. I might have had a hard day. But bad is a judgment word. I must be very careful how I use that. Accepting everything that happens, because we don't have a choice. Something happened. It happened. I can fight against it, but it happened. Equanimity, which I'm thinking about and starting to write about a little bit, the mental attitude of being at peace with the push and pull of experience. Again, what's in our control, what's out of our control? What's in my control? Okay, this I can work on, this I can do. What's out of my control, distressing, but let it go. Don't let it affect my peace of mind. Self-compassion, embracing imperfection and vulnerability, I think is key to creating resilience. Communicating, and knowing that communication does not require fluency. Communication is so much, and fluency is not, it's often perceived to be central to communication, but it's not. Self-disclosure, self-advocacy, educating ourselves about stuttering, again, unapologetic and unconditional acceptance of stuttering, and knowing that stuttering is a completely normal way of talking for people who stutter. There's not normal speech and stuttered speech. Stuttered speech is completely normal for people who stutter, because that's our physiology, that's who we are. With that, firm rejection of the stigma of stuttering and letting go of the opinions of others about how we talk or how we should talk. Questions, comments, complaints? Any complaints? Come on, there must be some. Questions? Yeah.
There was a question in the a chat. Um, perhaps you could address that. It was interesting. It was about whether or not stuttering could be considered neurodivergent. It was by a guy named Jason, I believe.
Okay, it's a wonderful question. Thank you, Jason, for raising it. I think so. Stuttering, we stutter because we have a neurophysiological difference that affects part of the way our brain works. And if neurodivergence refers to human variability as it applies to as it applies to variability in people's brains. And I apologize for my words. I haven't dealt with this topic a lot, so I'm not sure if I'm using the right words. But yeah, our brains are different. So why wouldn't it be part of neurodivergence? Does that make sense? Laura asked, what is the best way to keep stigma at bay for children that do not yet feel the stigma? Such a wonderful question. Thank you, Laura. I'll venture an answer. I want to think about this more. It's such a wonderful question. But off the cuff, at home, if you speak about stuttering openly and the parents give the child as much time to speak as they want, and the parents and the siblings and the uncles and the aunts and the grandpas and the grandmas are all aligned with it's okay to stutter, and we don't interrupt little Johnny when he talks, and we don't look at him weird, and we handle our own discomfort because that's our own. We create an environment where Johnny feels safe. And we speak about stuttering. We don't hide it. Hey, Johnny, you know, the way you're supposed, obviously, I don't know how to speak about it, but at the appropriate time, we speak about Johnny. Yeah, Johnny, you stutter. This is what stuttering is about. It's a difference. It's not a defect. Sometimes it can be hard, but it doesn't define you. It doesn't define you in any way, and you can speak and you make your voice heard. And children are going to suffer from bullying no matter what happens. So trying to prevent the stuttering in children is not going to prevent the bullying, because it's going to happen anyway, unfortunately. So I think that, Laura, best way to keep the stigma at bay is to be open about stuttering in the house, to have the child's various circles of support, the primary family, the extended family, the uncles and the aunts, the siblings, the grandparents, and the teachers. Get them involved in it. So that everybody's on board with this. It's okay to stutter, and this is how we behave when we're with Johnny and he stutters. We don't offer advice. We simply wait for him to say what he has to say. And I think by doing that, we can, I think, keep the stigma at bay for children. They will encounter the stigma, but they'll encounter it. They'll know they stutter. They'll know it's okay to stutter. They have a say. They won't have a reason to feel ashamed about stuttering, and they'll be able to say to the kid or the parent, other parent or teacher sometimes, who has something to say about the stuttering, they'll be able to say, yeah, I stutter, so what? Imagine that. Imagine the child being able to say, yeah, I stutter, so what?
Hanan, let's take one final question from Jory, and then we'll be wrapping up.
Sure.
Okay. Thank
Jory?
you. Thanks, Pam.
Hi, Jory.
Yeah, I'm a speech language pathologist, hopefully not a bad guy. And hopefully nobody will shoot me after I say what I want to
No
say.
way. It's fine.
From my experience and perception of working with little ones, it seems to me, and I'm not the only one, there's some research on this as well, that every little one, not just the ones who stutter, are highly attuned. They are so supercharged sensitive to the adult responses to them. Most of them. Some of them are, somewhere else.
Okay.
If there's a highly charged fear response that was not intended by some other person because they don't understand what stuttering is from a peer to peer, like what just happened? Or, maybe like a uh-oh from a parent that was not intended as an uh-oh. It just was like, now what do I do? I had that kind of response when my kids started stuttering. It was like, oh,
Sure.
it's a natural response.
Sure.
And I think that is the origin, not the neurophysiological basis. It's the origin, and then it can be found because there's this system that kicks in and teaches our neurology how to respond in a speaking situation. And then it's found, in the science. So I think we can go back even deeper than we have a difference. We are neurodivergent. I don't see that world. I see it so differently. I agree with just about everything else that you're saying, but I see that we can dig even deeper to get to what is the origin and help heal that. Because we also know, I mean, I listened to you with the long periods of speech when you were able to get out of your thoughts, is what it looked like, of, oh, there's, maybe this word coming up where I have blocked in the past, where that's subconscious. You're not fully aware of that, but there it comes, and it, manifests as a little bit of a repetition. That's what happens if you're not totally aware. Once you become aware, like you said, then you can give it non-judgment, kindness, and it will start to dissipate, just like all the other stuff that you described with eye contact, etc. So that's how I see it. And please don't shoot me. Thank you.
No. So thank you, Jory. Jory, am I saying your name correctly?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and your question. I mean, it's wonderful topics that we could speak about for a long time. Firstly, I'm not against speech therapists. I apologize if I gave that impression. I don't want to shoot anyone, not even a speech therapist. Okay, so yeah, the parent who encounters that first stutter, it's very possible that they'll react in the way that you do, and the child will pick up on it. And the child will pick up on that, and the child will realize, hey, I did something wrong because look how my mom reacted. And this is also not a judgment on parents, okay? Child will pick up on it, say, look how my mom reacted. And then the child will do whatever he can to not do that again.
Right.
So that's not the start of stuttering, Jory. That's the start of struggling to avoid stuttering and the start of stigma and shame and fear, etc.
And I agree.
And that's what we can work to prevent developing.
Yes, and I agree. The stuttering that I was talking about really is, again, I was referring to the little ones, and that's just normal, like learning to walk. And you get up, you trip, you fall, you get up again. You trip, you fall, you get up again. That's just part of the learning to walk process and learning to talk process. It's messy stuff. It just doesn't come out smooth and clear every single time. But sometimes there's a reaction, and if there's a fear response, and if it's, a highly sensitive individual here, that might build and build and build. That's all I'm saying.
Right, for sure. And the challenge is to work with that fear response. And
yes,
you
so
know,
it's about the
it's very
fear.
difficult. It's very difficult, I imagine. I don't know, I'm not a therapist at the very young age, to differentiate between the developmental disfluencies and stuttering. Okay, so speech therapists, I'm sure, are trained to identify and differentiate. But as opposed to what are called maybe normal developmental speech, speech disfluencies, it can be very harmful to refer to compare stuttering with learning to walk, because it's different. We also create an expectation that we will learn to not stutter. And that expectation to learn to not stutter feeds into that fear response.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. It's not easy at all. But then working with the parents, doing training for the parents, that's the main thing to do at the young age with the little one. Teaching the parents, hey, we understand your fear. This is different. You're worried about your child, we understand. However, your child stutters. It may go away and it may not. The child will succeed and live a wonderful life if they stutter, as long as we don't feed into the fear response, and we don't feed into the fear response by the parents adopting behaviors that are somewhat counterintuitive for them, by, for example, not reacting automatically with their fear. And I say this with all compassion. Okay, but it's the parents who can model the unconditional acceptance that the child can then absorb.
Yeah,
and
that's
the speaking about the stuttering in an open, non-judgmental way.
Yeah, and I'm saying the same exact thing when a kid gets, but this is where I believe in the walk and talk. When a kid trips and falls, and then they get up, even sometimes when they trip or just fall down, they get up and they fall down or go, oh,
Right.
you know, it's a joyful response. It's not a joyful response when we get this. That is not the response. It's a fear response. And it's so, you know, it is okay. I think if we, and this is where we're on the same page, if we can get to parents and help them understand, it's like, oh, in this moment, this is what's happening. And I love you, just like Mary would. I love you. You know, this is cool. I love you, you know, whether you speak like this or like that. It's just an I love you response. And it's not natural. It's counterintuitive. It takes work to get to that place.
Sure.
And so that's why, you know, I think we're really thinking the same thing, but slightly different takes at a certain origin point. Yeah.
You know, as I said, this is a wonderful, important, complex topic about which I would love to have more discussion with you and others, and, you know, would benefit from being given the amount of time that such an important topic deserves.
Yeah. Thank you,
Jory.
Pam, for pulling this together. It's terrific.
Yeah, it has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Hanan, for being such a wonderful speaker today and for sharing so much of your own personal wisdom and insights with us. And thank you all who attended. Great comments in the chat box. Thank you again, Hanan, for your willingness to share your slide deck. This has been recorded, so we will probably have these things available within the next week or so. So thank you all again.